This series of interviews was deeply disturbing for me. It was hard to hear the facts about empire builders from Europe who sent explorers to the Atlantic West Coast and whose idea of empty land meant it was free for the taking, to be stolen. How could they think that? Well, because the papal edict said so. Over time, all manner of devious lies and laws displaced Indigenous people from their familiar territories. This separation led to a torrent of destructive conditions. The larger the land mass taken over by settlers and government, the smaller the land available to Indigenous peoples. In the interviews, we were reminded that Indigenous people always shared and never said no. The way of life in cultures across this land was to teach survival and to guide the newcomers. As a kid, what was I learning? Well, at school, a few textbook pictures of Indigenous people on the plains, their teepees, and bison grazing on grass or being shot. Posters depicted the marine travelers planting a flag on beaches, being welcomed by what I thought of as fancy-clad people. Those were the First Nation inhabitants. On the playground, some salacious ditties were sung along with smirks. I was uneasy. In so-called cowboys and Indian movies, when Indigenous people were depicted, they usually portrayed the bad guys. And the action music taught me who I should dread. These experiences were unavoidable, but to ask questions was discouraged or dismissed. A personal story. My initiation into mistreatment of Indigenous people began when I was 9, a new immigrant from England. A new friend, Oliver, and his sister lived in a fascinating log house which sat beside the dirt road my brother and I walked along to school. For 2 years, Oliver was a gentle, fun friend. My family moved then, and I attended another school. One day, as a bunch of us played tag, I saw Oliver on the grounds next door and made an excited rush towards him, calling his name. Immediately, the other kids yelled, "No, you can't go over there. That's the Indian school." I was dashed, confused, and deflated. I did not see Oliver again and never forgot that incident. It's imprinted on my mind and in my heart. In 2008, I read a history book that stunned me, A Fair Country Telling Truths About Canada by John Ralston Saul. It shook me awake to Canada and the effects of colonization. It revealed the government attitude, which was, how can we get these people out of the way? Laws and prohibitions were drawn up as if from the ether, sometimes called legal fictions, in order to accomplish that goal. In Canada, there was not the kind of bloodletting by killing and shooting as in America, but in more subtle ways by land displacement. Indigenous people were corralled, segregated on small plots of land, dividing them from their sacred territories, which prevented them from pursuing their livelihoods. This separation was devised to get the stumbling blocks of treaty negotiations out of the way or to sidestep negotiated promises. We know the horrific experiences of the many children torn from their families and the shattered relationships of families and communities. We cannot ignore the long-term effects, identified now as intergenerational trauma. I felt encouraged by the last interviews when the speakers urged us to do various things, to see where we each fit in the connectedness, the web of this Canadian story, to not be a spectator. Don't wait for governments or institutions to change the way we do things. Speak up, be curious, educate myself, accept what was done, what happened, to not be afraid to do it together, they said, to get along in mutually beneficial ways. Indigenous people have unmasked the truths they have known all along, as evidenced by Orange Shirt Day, unmarked graves, murdered and missing women and girls, idle no more, amazing music and beautiful art, young, new, educated leaders, and honoring of words and deeds by the elders, and much more. Together, we can challenge feeble orthodoxies we all have heard and unfortunately accepted. The Chief Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Senator Murray Sinclair, was one of the speakers. He now calls for a doctrine of reconciliation. The 94 calls to action on reconciliation is a guide for individual instructions, with individual instructions. I will continue to listen and find opportunities to learn more and act where I can. So the question is, how are we going to get along here? Thank you.